You've probably heard of the Saturn Return. You know, you get two of them. You get one when you're about 29 and one when you're about 60. This week we are talking about Saturn with Alejo Lopez, who is an expert in the subject. He's also a Jungian analyst, and he's going to talk to us about the fact that Saturn is about to change signs for the first time in 2 years, what it means, who it's going to make life easier for, who's going to have all the Saturn challenges coming their way, and we also delve into the Saturn return. It's all in this week's Mainly Moonology podcast. All right, so Alejo Lopez. Now you say your name for me because I'm sure you say it much better than I do.
It's okay. Alejo, yes.
Alejo Lopez. So Alejo is my guest this week, and I am so excited to welcome him to the show. We've actually just had a little chat before we hit record, but he is an Argentinian-born psychologist and astrologer who lives in Greece. He's been traveling since he was 23. He's a licensed psychologist. He's got an MA in cultural astronomy and astrology. And he also is becoming a certified Jungian analyst. Can't even say it. Yes. And we are talking about Saturn today. So yes. Welcome to the show, Alejo.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, thank you so much.
So this show will go out with really the last week of Saturn in Pisces. Now, if you're listening to this and you're going, well, I'm not Pisces, doesn't matter. It's going to affect everyone. It's the last week of Saturn in Pisces. It's ahead of the first foray of Saturn into Aries. And as we were just talking, it's actually going to affect everyone differently, not least of which is that some people are having the pressure come off them, some star signs, and some are having the pressure coming onto them. So we've got all that to discuss today. So tell us your initial thoughts on Saturn. What's the big picture people need to know about this last week of Saturn in Pisces?
Wow. So let's say Saturn has been in Pisces for like 2.5 years. So I would say the first thing would be, okay, kind of look back, because it's like you're saying, it doesn't matter if you're a Pisces or not. Probably you have some planet or some celestial point in Pisces or in Virgo or in Gemini or in Sagittarius. So it must have affected you in some way, most probably. So I would say look back to the last 2.5 years and try to see in which ways you had to perhaps surrender some stuff, give up some stuff, in which way you felt constrained and you may have felt that you had to give up or that you had to invest more effort and more energy. So this is like when the planet is going to move to the other sign. It's like perhaps the last chance to reflect on what you have gained from that period. And maybe it's harder to see what you have gained if you don't reflect first on what the challenge was, right? So if you know a little bit of astrology, okay, look at your chart and look at what planets you have in mutable signs, which are, as we said, Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, and Sagittarius. And you can kind of, if you know a little bit, try to think about what this planet is about, and it's going to be easier to find, right? Where was it that you felt more constrained, you felt more challenged, you felt you had to invest more energy, commit more, and sometimes you might have failed, felt failure. It's an experience that we must acknowledge also, and we must experience. We're tasting life, and part of life is failure, right? So as the planet gets to the end of the sign, with Saturn, we usually speak about the idea of maturity. And I think you mentioned I'm a Jungian analyst. I think Saturn is one of the key planets in the process of individuation, this idea of becoming yourself, becoming a unique being, different from the masses. And Saturn is doing that by restricting, right? By showing us that no, not everything we dream of, not everything we want is possible. And by doing that, Saturn is showing us who we really are, right? So once we achieve that moment, we get this kind of sense of maturity and wisdom, if you want. But so in order to do this, I think it's a nice time to reflect on where did I feel challenged in the last 2.5 years? Why? How did I react? What did I feel was taken? What opportunities I felt were taken away from me? How did I react to what aspects or areas of life I committed to? What did I get from these reactions? And all of these are, I think, questions to ask. So because I'm more into psychological astrology, I'm less into the predictive aspect and more into what questions can we ask, right, about what's happening. Yes. Does it make sense?
So let's just say, yeah, it makes complete sense. So let's say someone's thinking, I mean, I feel like most people, but maybe it's just me, I feel like most people can probably look at the last couple of years and be quite clear on what their challenges were and what they've lost and where they were restricted, which are all very Saturnian things. So once they've worked that out, is it what lessons did I learn, or is it, oh my God, thank God it's over, or what is it?
Hopefully it's not going to be, I mean, hopefully it's not only going to be, oh my God, thanks God it's over, but that could be part of the experience also. We're humans, right? But I think the idea of what lessons have I learned it's a good approach, but I would also think of how have I changed? Because to me, Saturn takes us to the essence of things. So when we talk about individuation, the idea is that, I think in our culture, we fight Saturn, we dislike Saturn because we feel it's restricting, right? But what I would say is Saturn is not restricting, it's actually defining. And because now we have these strong values about freedom, which I think are important values, of course. I'm not saying I'm against freedom, but I think that we idealize freedom and we want to take it away from the real aspects of life, how life really is, because there's no absolute freedom. And there's no absolute freedom from the moment that we are born, because from the moment that we're born, we are dying. Every day we're closer to our death. So since the very beginning of life, we're conditioned. We're never fully free. So anything that seems to attempt against this sense of freedom, we get so upset and so angry, right? And Saturn is that. Saturn is attempting against our sense of freedom. And that's why I think we consider that it's restricting and that it's so hard and so. But actually, what I would say, Saturn is helping us define who we are. If I tell you this shirt that I'm wearing is blue, and I would say, no, you're not letting me choose what color I see in my shirt. Well, yeah, in some ways, it might be a restriction to my own perception of the colors, but like most people will agree that this shirt is blue. So this is what Saturn is saying. Saturn is saying, no, you are not everything you think you are. You're actually this. But in order to do that, I say he or it makes us feel restrained and give up things. So what I would say is, when we reflect, the question would be, okay, what do this experience say about me? Who is it that I am after having gone through this period? And for people who are, like you were saying, this is moving into Aries. So now these are the questions that people will start asking themselves if they have placements in Aries, Cancer, Capricorn, and Libra, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So many things to talk about. Just before we talk about anything else, I know a lot of people who'll be listening have really only heard of Saturn and know about Saturn in terms of their Saturn return. Okay, so can you just talk about that a little bit, so people who kind of, I've heard of the Saturn return, how does that all apply to what we're talking about here? Yeah.
Yes, so when we're born, Saturn is in a particular placement in the chart, in a sign and a house, and with certain aspects. But since the moment we're born, I had a teacher, Bernard Brady, who said we start our own personal calendar, because the planets will start marking special moments in our lives for ourselves, because it depends on our chart, right? Because the planets are always in motion. So the planets are moving around the chart, and each planet has its own speed. The speed of Saturn is quite slow. So after 7 years, let's say 7 years and a half, it's gonna come up into a placement, into a position in the chart that is gonna make what we call a 90-degree angle. We call this a square. And if you think about the sun and the moon, for instance, it's like when the moment you see half of the moon, right? So this is a moment of tension. It's like, just imagine how you feel when you are at the night and you look at half of the moon. It's half light, half darkness. You don't know what's going to happen. So these 7 years, it's a moment of tension. It's a moment of tension in which all of these themes that we talked about feeling restricted and feeling that you have to commit and you have to do effort, gets activated. And usually it has to do, we have already started primary school, it has to do with starting to develop a social identity, right? Kind of more independent from your family.
I was just going to say something that I've always found so interesting because of that Saturn square at about the age of 7. Did you know that the age of 7, this is something I learned with my son when he was 7. It's called the age of reason, which is so Saturnian. It's when people start to reason, and Saturn is logic.
Totally. Yeah, I didn't know. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Nice. Yes. What I knew is I think Steiner says that the soul takes 7 years to be fully embodied. So it's like quite significant also that it's like these 7 years because Saturn is also the body, right?
Yeah.
And so, well, I'm not going to tell the whole process now because otherwise it's going to take forever. But basically, every 7 years, Saturn is doing some kind of proposing some kind of challenge. When we get to around 28, 29, 29 years and a half, let's say, but I think we can start feeling it from 28, Saturn is coming back to where it was, right? And so Saturn is about this idea of the model, the principles, what we are supposed to become, right? And so when we were born, we were given a Saturn, we were told this is what you're supposed to become, but this Saturn has been experiencing life. And maybe what we were told we're supposed to become is not really what we are becoming. I had a friend, I was an actor before, like a long time ago, and I had a director, who's also not my friend, who was always telling me that he became a good director when he learned to give up to the play he had in his mind and to actually embrace the play that was happening there on stage with the actors. And it's a similar thing with the Saturn return. Saturn comes back to the place where it's born, and it's going to ask us, this that you had imagined for yourself, that you had imagined you were going to become, is it really who you are becoming? And most of the time, it's not. Most of the time, the model and what's actually happening does not fully fit. I'm not saying it's always catastrophic. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, are you saying that the person we were told we would become by our parents and our teachers and our friends?
Yes.
Is that what you mean? Yeah,
yes.
Right, okay.
Or society, or yes. I think at first we experience this outside, right? It's the people outside. It comes to a point in which we start telling ourselves, like, this is what I am, this is what I'm supposed to be, right? And so when it comes back, I don't think it ever fully fits. I'm not saying it's always, Elise Green says that it has a dual flavor, kind of bitterness because we give up to dreams that we had. But then she also says, but it might also have a sense of achievement, a sense of accomplishment. And I think it might come with both things. I mean, I'm not saying it's always a negative experience. Yeah.
All right. And so that's 29-ish.
Yes.
What about the second Saturn return?
So the second one,
the third, depending on your theory about retrogrades, but let's say the second Saturn return.
Okay, yeah. The second one is, well, it's about when we're 60, a little bit before we're 60. And I think we're going to re-experience similar themes that we had experienced when we were 30. But the difference is that I think we're much more aware of, I mean, I think it comes with a kind of contradictory experience, because on the one hand, we are much more aware that we have less time. I mean, one of the things that happened on the first Saturn return is that we realize that we have lost time, that we're already 30 years of life has passed. When we get to the...
And we're adults.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I'm not a kid anymore. When we get to 60 years old, I think this pressure of feeling like there's time that has been lost, that cannot ever be recovered, it's intensified. But my experience with the people I haven't been through that, but the people I've spoken about that, is that there is also a sense of acceptance. But I think it always depends on each person's process, okay? But there's also kind of a sense of acceptance of, actually, I'm going to focus on what's going to remain after I go. There's this sense of, I still have things to do, But what matters now is not so much, it's not only for myself. There's kind of a sense of transcendence. So this kind of perception that time is running out opens up this other realm of trying to find other ways to live longer, which is not necessarily physically living longer. You know what I mean? So I think it's a moment in which a lot of people start thinking about their legacy. What are they going to give if they have children to their children? And yeah.
The thing that comes to mind as well while you're talking is the idea that, it's like, when you're in a restaurant and you've bought all these dishes and drinks and you're sort of adding it all up and you're getting the total down the bottom. There's something Saturnian about that, and there's something about the second Saturn return that's a bit like, well, adding it all up. What have I come to here?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes, totally. I think it has
I feel like it's a bit like, this is what I've achieved, and now I'm not necessarily going to be in that first or even second flush of youth, and I can see what my final tally is, if you like. Exactly. Even though we can still continue to achieve, but in a way the die is cast, I suppose.
Yes, but I've noticed that many people actually do this. Many people do this, have this reflection like you're saying, and from then on they say, okay, now I will only focus on what I really care. There's this sense of, when they come up to this total sum, it's like, okay, I've done what was supposed to do. Either I achieved, didn't achieve, I'm successful or not, and I mean, how it might bring with different experience. But now I'm done with that. It's like I've noticed many people are like, okay, I'm done with that. Now I can focus on what really is I care. Also a Saturnian thing of duty. I did my job. Now, don't ask any more of me.
Yeah, and also I think, I don't have my Bill's astrology dictionary in front of me, or I would look it up, but I feel like discernment is a very Saturnian thing, like just being really clear on what actually matters and what's real, and making decisions sort of with that sort of clarity. So so if you're nearly 60, this is what you're going through, and if you're nearly 29, this is what you're going through. Amazing. So Alejo, can I also just circle back a bit now that we've kind of helped people hopefully understand Saturn even better? People are scared of Saturn, it's true. And I don't think they need to be. But I think one of the reasons why people are scared of Saturn is because it's the planet of karma. And sometimes we know, what you sow is what you reap. And I do feel like sometimes we're trying to cut corners in life, or we're going too fast and we're just trying to, gloss over things, and Saturn won't let you do that. And so that's why, even if you're not in your Saturn return, even if you've just got Saturn coming in to, go over your sun or square it or whatever, I think people have a certain amount of fear. It's like some innate fear of Saturn because they know it's the judgment.
Yeah. Yes, you're gonna pay the consequences of what you've done. Yes.
Exactly. And that's why I think people are scared of Saturn, because on some level they know now is when I get my, my reward or my thwack, my Saturn, discipline. Yeah. Okay. So we've said now, I don't know if we made it crystal clear, but we'll say it again. So for the mutable signs, Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, Sagittarius, actually it's going to be a little bit easier for you. What about the cardinal signs? I should ask you, what sign are you?
I'm a Taurus.
Okay, so you're kind of out of the firing line.
I don't come from the 2 years and a half difficult, and I'm not going to have them yet.
Yes, exactly. Although you have had the planet of chaos Uranus in your sign for a good bit.
I've had so many other things, so don't worry.
Yeah. So, okay, so anyone who is a cardinal sign, which is Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, what can they expect, and how do they use this for good? And is there a Jungian aspect to this, or a psychological aspect to this, that you can, try and explain? I know we don't have hours and hours, and it's probably a 10-week course for people, but in a nutshell, what should they expect when they start hearing that Saturn's in their sign, or opposing their sign, or whatever, or squaring their sign?
Because I think, for people who are starting to learn astrology and they want to follow their transits and everything, I think there is I have these two very simple approaches, simple questions to ask. You look at where Jupiter is, And this area of life is an
Your
area
natal chart?
in your natal, no, in where Jupiter by transit is going, which house
Okay.
Jupiter is going by transit. And in this house is a house of opportunities. So maybe it's a house in which you can try to expand and do things related to that house. Yeah. And then you look at where Saturn is, which is going to stay in the same house. If you were telling me use a whole sign, so it's going to stay in the same house for 2.5 years around. So you look where Saturn is, and you know this house is the house that's going to probably bring difficulties and bring challenges. Yes. So the matters of that house, you start preparing for that. Yeah. You start preparing for what challenges could this bring. And I go back to the idea of the essence, and I like your idea of discernment also. Is this for me or not? You know, I like your idea of discernment because, well, I told you I studied Kabbalah, and in Kabbalah, the story of the Garden of Eden, of Eden, when they eat the apple, that the apple is given by the snake, and the snake is Satan. But in Kabbalah, Satan is linked to the Messiah. They are not so separate, and the devil is the Lord of the earth. So he's the one that takes us down into the earth through discernment, because when we eat the apple, we get this ability to reflect for our own and make decisions for our own. And this makes us conditioned. This forces us to go down into our earth, into our bodies. That's when they discover they are naked, and all of these things. So the idea of Saturn is the idea of taking responsibility for your life. And this is the idea of having to reflect and having to make choices. Yes. So when Saturn goes into a house, I would say in terms of this house, or if it's touching any planet, and you were talking about people who have the sun in the cardinal signs.
Yeah, but it can even be you're a Taurus with your Venus in Aries, for example. So
Exactly,
you should look
yes.
at your chart for any cardinal sign planets, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Always look at your chart to make it more specific, yes. So in this area of life, there's a moment of discernment. This is a hard word to say for me in English. A moment to reflect, is this for me or not? Because if it's not for you, Saturn is going to take it away. Saturn takes the things to the essence. You know, it takes things to the essential. Saturn rules the bones. So it will take you to the essence of things. So if anything is too much, Saturn will take it away. So I think like the process is to be willing to give up to these things, be willing to recognize what things are not for me and I'm supposed to give them away, and then what things actually I'm being tested. You know, what things I cannot stand giving them away. I feel, you know, I go into this very, very dark place if I give them away. And so I'm actually choosing to commit, because it's strange, because for some people, Saturn will mean probably to give up things, and there's going to be a sense of failure, feeling of failure, perhaps. But for some other people, the transit of Saturn will mean, no, this is a moment to commit to this. This is a moment in which you invest effort. So how to distinguish?
Despite the challenges.
Exactly. And how to distinguish when is it the moment to give up and when is it the moment to invest more effort? This is very hard, and this depends on so many different things. It's very hard. But that's why I think it's important to try to be aware of what is this moment saying about me. Is this really what I want? You know, Saturn, when Saturn goes over the sun, you were talking about the cardinal signs, whatever we want to express, whatever we want to be seen for or be recognized for, it feels like it's rejected. So this rejection helps me kind of look deeply into what I'm doing and see what is it about this way that I'm using to express myself that is not working. How can I change it? What is it that I have to do to make it work in the real world? Not in my imagination, but in the real world. And by going through this process of examination, actually, when I finally shine consistent, you know, it has like this sense of embodiment, and it will probably last longer, whatever you create after the process, right?
Sustainability, yeah. And so would you encourage people to look at the house then that Aries rules, rather than necessarily looking at which planets it's squaring or sextiling or whatever, or a mixture of both, or how would you approach it?
So I would say a bit of both. If you're starting with astrology, I think it's easier if you look at the house I think it's quite clear, the experience. Of course, I think this experience is going to be enhanced if there is some planet in the house. But the experience is still going to be there. You know, it's going to be more subtle, but it's still going to be there. Yes.
So, Alejo, I understand you are actually going to be giving a Saturn workshop, as it turns out.
Yes.
So tell us about that and what's in that for anyone who's listening going, oh, my goodness, I need to know more.
And it's interesting, you know, that you talked about karma, and we were going to record this before, but then we couldn't record it, and we had to record it now. And because we're recording now, we ended up talking about Saturn. Yes.
Yeah.
Which is related to, interesting.
And timing, Saturn timing.
Yeah, exact timing. Exactly. It's about time. Yes, exactly. Quite interesting. Yeah. So the workshop, yes, is on Astrology University on the 24th. It's a webinar more than a workshop, I'm thinking. But the idea, yes, is to see exactly, to go deeper into this idea of the Saturn return, the different stages of the Saturn return, and how we can interpret the Saturn return in a more specific way. So how can we try to see for this particular person how it might feel, the Saturn return, instead of coming up with generalized interpretations? Because I think, like you said, many people know about the Saturn return now, and they know that when they're around 29, they're going to go through this, or when they're around 59, they're going to go through this, 58. And maybe because they know, they will go to an astrologer, right, to ask for help. So the question is, they will already know some of the things that we would usually say in the past about this return. They already know this because they have read about this. So how can we make the session more fruitful for them, pinning these same ideas down into their chart? And basically this is what I'm trying to, I don't think there's a method like do 1, 2, 3, but I'm trying to reflect on how to do this. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so basically, especially if you're around 29 or approaching 60, this workshop is definitely for you. Will it be very advanced astrology, or is it, you know, how much astrology do people need to know? Otherwise, maybe they should have a personal consultation.
Yeah, I would say like intermediate, like you need to know the meaning of the planets, the signs, and the houses, and hopefully the aspects also. And if you know that, I think you can manage.
Okay. So if you want to look it up, I'll put a link below, but astrologyuniversity.com, and then just look up Alejo, which is Alejo, and you'll find it on the website. Do you also do personal consultations, Alejo, for anybody who's like, well, I'm really just a beginner, but I am going up to my Saturn return, I need to know?
Yes, I actually do personal consultations. You can check my webpage, liminalcosmos.com. And also I'm doing, sorry, yeah?
I just said it, liminalcosmos.com.
Yes, liminalcosmos.com.
I will make sure to put a link to that.
Thank you. And just talking about this, actually, I'm doing a special, like, kind of session that it's shorter, but only focuses on what Saturn may be doing, because since it's changing signs, I know a lot of people are worried, but maybe they don't want a whole session, you know, because they have had a session about their yearly forecast or something. And so I came up with this idea of doing like small sessions of 50 minutes, focusing only on Saturn. But I'm also open to doing the other sessions, yes.
How long are they, these Saturn sessions?
50 minutes.
50.
50. Normally the other ones are 1 hour and a half, yeah.
Okay, all right, well, that's brilliant. So, okay, so if somebody just wants to know about Saturn, they just have to buy a Saturn session, and then they can, yeah, that's fantastic. What a great idea. All right, well, look, Alejo, thank you so much. So great to speak to you. And I hope the workshop goes really, really well. And I will hope to meet you one day whenever you're in London or I'm in Athens. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who listened.